All right, we are live. So what's happening, Luke?
Hey, what is cooking, my man?
So had a little bit of technical. Actually, I shouldn't say technical problems, as it's more for just making sure all the settings are set up correctly. That's always a good thing. But so
Always.
we missed last week because of Good Friday. Was it a Good Friday for you?
It was absolutely
I can't
little
remember what I was doing.
kiddo action. Always nice to have an extra day off school. Gosh, I don't know about
Yeah.
you, but we seem to have so many random days off of school. I mean, obviously Good Friday is Good
I
Friday,
don't
but
remember us
um,
having that many days off of school when we were younger.
dude, it's wild. Like we will have like random half days on like a Wednesday. Like it's you know wildly inconvenient. I can't imagine people who, don't have much flexibility with their schedule. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. All right, so been thinking about what to talk about today, and of course, we really focus on technology, artificial intelligence, lead generation, conversions, all that kind of fun stuff. But as I'm going out on the road, I came up with this presentation called "The 10 Strategies to Thrive." Originally, it was called 10 Strategies to Thrive in 2025 because it rhymed, but then I just thought, that's kind of cheesy. A. B, that gives a shelf life of it,
Right.
and it talks about, and everything in there is relevant to be evergreen. But I started off with data. I started off with where things are at on the housing market.
Yeah.
So right now, and I compared 2019 to like 2024. So I had, I wanted to have a regular pre-COVID year, that last year that we didn't get affected by COVID, because I think everything's
Right.
been wacky ever since.
Yeah.
And then I compared it to 2024, and I got to tell you, I don't think that from a housing perspective that things are going all that great. We see one third. So in 2019, there were more than 6 million homes that sold in the United States. So 12 million sides. And in 2024, we had just over 4 million. So 800 sides. Okay, I think I did the math right, but I think you're following me on that. We see the median sales price went from, gosh, let me pull that up. I'm going to pull up the data that I pulled up, but the median sales price increased 41% from
Okay.
2019 straight across the board for the United States. 41% 2019 to 2024.
That's wild.
Interest rates, of course, went up.
Yeah.
So home prices continue up. But here's the thing. We all know that the people's income isn't matching that. But compared to 2019 to 2024, the median income has actually decreased by 0.7%. So when we start looking at affordability, I was talking to one of my colleagues, and he lives in, I think he lives in Texas, and they're thinking about moving. And he's like, "Hey, do you think I should sell? We're thinking about selling and then renting it out." And I said, "Well, I did that back in the years." He's like, "How'd you make out?" I said, "I made out pretty good." I said, "But hindsight being 2020, I would have just stuck around a little bit longer, and I could have probably made an extra few $100,000. But at the time, this was right
Yeah.
before COVID, when things were starting to disconnect, and you guys we were talking about it then."
Yeah.
But then I said, "Look, how much more do you think your house is going to go up based on affordability?" He's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "It's all great that people think that prices will continue to go up, but sooner or later, each market is going to hit that cap where people just can't afford it." And we're seeing a lot of that in the United States. And so now it's turning. But the whole presentation talks about, don't worry about what's going on. Things are always going to be going on. You need to focus on lead generation. Lead generation solves all problems. And so I would
Yeah.
talk about what you're doing as far as technology and landing page. And it's really just striking how, I've said this before, it's really striking about how little people know about lead generation in the online format. They still think that you have to just do it organically. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, there's definitely a big gap of what most people are doing, and it's it's still shocking to me that like such a large portion of the industry is not like it's almost like they're not living in reality of like now and how people behave and where consumers are.
Yeah,
Like the fact that, you know, in this day and age, there's folks that are new or new-ish to the industry, that they're not little or no social media presence. Like they're not like rarely doing anything. I mean, obviously there's people who do create content and stuff, but just it's shocking.
it's
And
crazy.
it boggles my mind, like how, like, if I look you up, what am I gonna find? Like if I go look for Brett Matzer online, like, and like, have you even taken a second to like Google yourself and see what other people see? Like, what are they gonna find?
And Google yourself in an incognito mode. So there's
Right.
no, so it's a core search and there's no influence into the way that you operate with Google and see what
Yeah.
you see. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting that it's not interesting because I just came back from a meeting and it was for owners of companies, leaders of companies, and of course, someone comes up and talks about recruiting. I recruited a lot of people in my time and trained a lot of people in my time, and I I have mostly a different. I should say we have a different philosophy on this. We really align with the modern consumer behavior, but it was a lot of like talk to people, pick up the phone, call them, and
Hmm.
talk to them about. And we were talking about recruiting agents, talk to them about their production. And I looked over to my colleague to the left of me. I said, the problem with that, I said, I agree with everything there. I said, but the problem with that is that that call probably wouldn't even get answered. A, because that's what modern consumer behavior says. And B, before they got into it, the way it was opened, it was like really hitting them hard on their personal level of production. They would probably have
Yeah.
gotten hung up on by that time. And then C, you just set the cadence. You just established that person's first interaction with you, and now they have judged you and painted you into a box that you might want to be painted into. So
Right.
I found it extremely interesting.
Yeah, that's funny you bring that up, because it's like when you're like trying to start an engagement on like almost personally attacking somebody and putting them on the defense about like their numbers. um Great way to start off a relationship. Like, even though that information is generally like available, if either through paid sources, or like, you should know that information, like you have the ability to know that information, and
Yeah.
maybe but yeah, I guess that's obviously the more often than the norm. Then, I mean, gosh, I was reading, I think it was like 74% of agents did less than or no deals all last year, or one or less deals
Yeah, I think
in
that was
2024.
that Inman article,
Yeah.
and it was a Redfin person that said it. I think in Inman, New York, 71%, I think is what it was.
Okay. But
And look,
70 that
I don't disagree with it. In fact,
but
what's that
even
law?
I mean, there's the Pareto, the 80/20, right? But still, like, you like obviously 20% of the people are doing 80% of the business, but even the bottom 70%, they're not doing any business at all, right? It's not even like they're doing a smaller portion of it. That is no business, um, which is insane to think about. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of part-time folks that aren't really doing anything, but or just in license only type of a situation. But yeah, that was just a wild statistic to be able to read. Like 70% of licensed agent didn't do a single. Was it a single transaction or no
Yeah, a single
transaction?
transaction. And that's interesting that you brought up the Pareto principle. I was looking up uh, Parkinson's law this morning,
Okay.
and one of the things I'm developing out is just like a talk track that talks about all these various different principles and laws and how they all affect
Yeah.
each other. So, of course, using AI in that. And that came up this morning. And just for those who are watching, the Pareto principle says that 80% of outcomes are determined by 20% of efforts, which means that the 20% do 80% of the work. And I think that's true. Here's the irony of that. When you have 6 million homes being sold, so the average age of a real estate agent went from the late 50s into the early 60s just in 1 year. And,
Really?
and here's where I see this happening. When you go from 6 million transactions, so 1,200 sides, to 4 million transactions to 800 sides, so you eliminate 1/3 of those transactions, that
Yep.
means that there's a lot of people who didn't do business. And typically that's going to be the lower end of the scale because it's usually the younger people who are newer into the industry. So by
Yeah.
eliminating those, it automatically increases the age of the people doing the business. The challenge with that is all of the training that is traditionally being done is based on the opinions and the journey of those who have been in the business for like 20 years.
Right.
Well, the way I started in the business 20 years ago, with the challenges, with the technology, with the way that things were set up back then, is not the same as it is today. And to continue to do the same activities as someone did 20, 25 years ago and trying to apply that to now, you're not going to get the same outcome. That's what you and I have talked about in cold calling, door knocking, and so on and so forth. We're not saying that it doesn't work. We're just saying it doesn't work all that. It's really not efficient.
I mean, obviously, picking up the phone and calling your database and past clients is like a core principle of, uh, of being in business, staying in touch with people. But, um, yeah, I mean, I, I think we've touched on this, like, numerous times before, where it's like, you have these people who've been in the business, they're doing production. What made them successful, that was something that they started decades ago, right? And they built their business around that, and that worked for them, and continues to work for them. But they've those people that are still here, they've obviously, the ones that couldn't cut it, couldn't be consistent, couldn't, continue to do their, daily disciplines, so to speak, you know, went by the wayside. So it's there's there's still huge value in a lot of the core fundamentals of, you know, doing stuff, but um yeah, but it's those decades of work that they put in that is allowing them to be able to do all the production, being consistent and being at that, top tier
Sure,
now.
sure.
And trying to instill that into somebody new, or pass that along, um, it's it's sets a lot of people up for, failure.
It does.
what
It really
what
does.
what got them there isn't going to get the next batch of folks there.
Well, and the interesting thing with that as well is when you have somebody who's been in the business a long time and they've built up their sphere of influence. Look, the definition of sphere of influence also has changed. It used to be that it had to be a personal relationship, belly to belly. I know you, you know me. See, I call that friendship. I call that,
Yeah.
I think it's more than sphere of influence. Now, sphere of influence is somebody or a person who actually has the ability to influence a group of other people. There is
Right.
no, it's more important that you know and like and trust me. And there is no variable where I have to know, like, and trust you.
Right.
That's the whole. Joe Rogan, he's an influencer for a lot of people. He does not have a personal relationship with his millions of followers.
Right.
They have a relationship with him. He does not have a relationship with them. So
Yeah.
that would be inaccurate to say that his audience is his sphere of influence and that you'd focus that. Nor is he calling anybody. It's interesting when people are saying you need to go out in there and get door knocking. I'm not against door knocking, but it really kind of depends on what your objective is. If your whole focus is just to door knock once and that's it, and you think that you're going to get massive amounts of business off of it, I think that's a ridiculous goal to have.
Yeah.
But as you're doing door knocking, the modern version of that, no one's pitching the doorbell. Everybody has a Ring doorbell or a system like that. They're just going up knocking, littering on your patio or your doorknob and leaving, and they're not pitching the doorbell. If I were doing that, I'd be pitching the doorbell.
I mean,
Knock, knock,
if
knock.
you're
Nobody's
there,
answering. Yeah, if you're there,
you could fire off a 30-second
yeah,
spiel. You
yeah.
know, hey, I promised my clients I was gonna talk to every homeowner in this subdivision, and we're looking for a property. They're really interested in moving in here. If you know anybody that's interested in selling, let me know. Here's my hold up a card or whatever
Yeah.
contact information.
And by the way,
Um,
while I have you, if you're interested in receiving my monthly market report on the value of the homes in your neighborhood, feel free to download it. It comes out on the 15th of each month. There's no cost or obligation to it. It's just a service I provide for the homeowners in this area. So now you have a
yeah,
way to actually grow your database of homeowners and perhaps even renters who might turn into buyers. But everybody's always so focused about going to the wedding proposal, the marriage proposal. They get
yeah,
someone on the phone and they just force feed all of these, hey, I want you to list your home or this, that, and the other, instead of being there of service.
right.
But look, that's
I
why 20% of agents do 80% of the work, because the 20% of the agents either A, they've been in the business a long time, they have come list me calls, but those too will fade out, and those are subject to local market dynamics. So if you're not growing your database, if you're not growing your lead generation with a colder audience, then what's happened is when the market goes up, things are great. When the market goes down, your business goes down as well.
right.
If you don't have that constant flow of leads, that kind of falls into what you do with your clientele, is working digital leads, and it's not hard. Do you remember when we first started going down this path? I mean, this was what? This was 2018 when you and I first met, and
Yeah.
how hard it was. Like, you had to have multiple rolls of duct tape to make things work.
Yeah, insane. I mean, and then like, not only that, like there was like, I mean, you could literally go on YouTube right now and within like 20 minutes learn how to set up like a Facebook and Instagram ad campaign, A to Z.
A to
Like
Z.
every single last thing that you need. There was no, like, you literally had to trial and error figure out everything.
Yeah.
And then nobody was, you know, anybody who knew how to do it was gatekeeping that information, charging thousands of dollars to do it. And yeah, so it's, it's the the information available on how to do things, is insane. And not only that, like obviously it's gotten significantly easier, technically, dumbed down, I guess, to make it as user friendly as possible. But yeah, it's wild.
Well, in addition to that, now you have Chat GPT, you have Grok, you have a lot of different. Gemini is now embedded into Google. If you have a
Right.
question, ask it like it's a person, and it will literally walk you step by
Right.
step through everything. There is zero reason why anybody shouldn't have to be able to do anything right now.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true. I think the biggest challenge for for people is not knowing where to start. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of different
Right.
directions you can go to. There's a lot of gurus out there that are saying, you have 10 different things, that 10 different people saying that this is the number one thing you have to do, and they're all different. But my take on it is lead generation. Nothing matters. Everything else will work itself out if all you do is focus on filling the funnel. And filling the
Yeah.
funnel is just start focusing on lead generation. The more leads you get in, regardless of what the conversion metrics are, you will punch deals out.
Right.
You might
Yeah.
generate 100 leads and only close one. Great. Now all you have to do is fine tune your system to get that conversion ratio up, and you have to increase your skills. I mean, sooner or later, someone's going to have to talk to somebody. And quite frankly, if you're ignorant and you don't come off as a professional manager, you're probably not getting the business. So there's that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like there, with all of the information available, it's the challenge becomes where to focus your energy at. And people, I think people struggle with that, with spreading themselves too thin, rather than picking one channel, one method, one strategy, and implementing it consistently over a period of time. And obviously I mean, you could do anything. You could pick any one of them, and they're all going to work. It's just kind of figuring out like what's the best fit for you and your personality and your existing skills. To if you're good at writing, right, if you're comfortable making videos, make videos.
Yeah.
Obviously you got to go where your people are, but they're everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, like whatever it is, they're there.
I talk to agents, and I think, yeah, then we're coming up on time, but I talk to agents and I let them know if you're not creating video content, you're literally missing the boat. And if you're so concerned about what you're going to look like and how you're going to feel about it, just rest assured that everybody's going to suck at the very beginning. And the great thing about that is nobody's going to watch those ones. But it's the it's
Right.
the doing them over and over and over again. Remember our very very first episode we did on this? It was like an hour and a
Yeah.
half. We're like, and then
Right.
now we're down to like 20 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
Very focused. So 23 minutes. All right. So look, we're at time. I know that you have somewhere to go, and I have a meeting that I have to go to. Any parting words?
Let's get it.
Let's get it. See you next week, Luke.
Rock and roll.
Bye.